Welcome everyone here today to listen to Dawn talk about CAS 2023. So we're excited to introduce the CFP. It opened, I believe it was April 4th. We got that opened, and we're going to have it open for up to April 30th. And if we need to extend that timeline, we will. But we're hoping that we can get enough submissions and get, and that's really the reason for this webinar in the first place, is to get more people introduced to what we're looking for CAS 2023, as well as the theme, and really how we can get some really great presentations and answer any questions by speakers and the community around the conference itself. We also recently just opened up the CAS 2023 ticketing system, and we are going to limit that currently to the first 70 tickets. The reason for that is because of the space at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So we are looking at ways that we can try to get more tickets for that, but right now we have a hard limit for 70 for that event. So to introduce Dawn, who doesn't really need a big introduction, but is really awesome at being testing. She's been in the testing space specifically for at least 30 years and is currently at Perf Test Plus and does a lot for consulting and training, and is really one of the experts around testing and working with teams. So we're really excited to have Dawn be the program chair for CAS 2023 and really help us as a community create better teams and the ways that we can do that. So Dawn, anything else you'd like to do before starting your presentation?
No, thanks, Dwayne, for that magnanimous introduction. I don't feel like an expert. I feel like a wanderer. This is kind of how I don't know, my career has gone. And I never really feel like I get to the top of any mountain. And I think a lot of career testers feel that way. You get to the top of a mountain and you go, dang, wrong mountain. And there you go, you get to do it again. So I feel like certainly I've been around. Yeah, it's almost 40 years now. Really, like cray. Can't even believe I've been in IT that long. But one of the inspirations for joining the team to bring the conference to fruition this year is about sort of filling a gap. What's really missing and what do we have? And specifically, what has AST and CAST and the AST community brought to our larger community? Some amazing stuff over the years. But what little corner are we not shining a light on? So this inspiration has kind of led me to think about the team. I know responsibility for testing and QA in general usually sits on a person or a small group of skilled professionals that focus on quality factors, evaluating software, providing feedback, yes, working with teams, presenting information to them, maybe metrics, maybe defects, whatever the context is for their situation. But the way things are trending, and this is everywhere, it's not a particular industry, it's not just because it's 2023 and we had COVID time. It's just simply because we're changing mindsets about software engineering, software development, software delivery, and testing is a part of that. And in some organizations, they don't think QA is. They've thrown it out. Like, we don't employ QA people here. We don't employ testers here. Well, okay. That doesn't mean testing isn't present. So that means for us, the people who are career testers, if we want to work in those industries, for those companies, on those projects, we have to figure out how to work with those people, potentially with a completely different job title. So what would that mean? What would quality mean, regardless of what your job title is? So quality is kind of the goal of the theme. We want to get to a quality outcome. But not be the superhero and try to make that happen ourselves. That's the idea. So quality is a race. The team can win, not just a superstar tester. And that's not to say we don't have a lot of superstar testers out there. We do. And a lot of them come to CAST year after year after year. And we love that. A lot of them present some of their amazing, tactics and techniques and experiences with us. It's fantastic. But not everyone that's looking to attend CAST or submit a talk for CAST is familiar with it. So a couple things I want to start out with. CAST is different from other software testing conferences in that we're tied to the AST, the Association for Software Testing, and our focus has always been about context and how do we do testing in a particular context, not waving the flag of best practices and thinking, well, if you just do all these things, everything will work out all right. Anybody who's experienced in the space for long enough knows that's not true. So CAST is one of the mechanisms by which AST spreads that message about context and how vital it is in tuning a testing process, a testing skill set, a test team to work with the larger team and be successful. So it's all those factors that drive the values behind context-driven testing. And if you're not familiar with it, please Google the heck out of it. You'll find really cool stuff that explains the principles behind context-driven testing. But to just call out a couple of things, we talk about being a skepticist, using empirical knowledge, not just saying, oh, well, that's the way it worked for somebody else, it must work for me that way. No, putting it through the filter of, does it apply in my context? This is huge. And a lot of testing conferences don't really think about their message and how it's going to be applied in different contexts. Say something like, well, we could take Google, we could take Facebook, we could take Credit Karma, we could take Intuit, we could take mobile games application. Would the same processes work across all of those? Probably not. How about add a medical device or something regulated? Probably not. Would the same people and the same skills bring out the best in those teams and for those product deliveries? Probably not. So that's one of the things that context can really add to the plate. It's adaptable. You do what you need to do, not what you don't need to do. It's diversified, so it can apply in lots of different situations. It focuses on the human factors. I worked for a test tools company for about 10 years. I can't tell you how many people have asked me, if I spend this amount of money in tools, how many testers can I get rid of? and my answer would always be, you can hire two. And they're going to cost you more than you had before. You're not getting rid of anybody. Tools don't replace humans, just like a food processor doesn't replace a chef. It's the same idea. These are human things and heuristic. So we use our experience and our guides to help us choose what to do. So this is huge for us. So if you're going to plan on presenting at CAST, or at least giving us a submission, please be context sensitive. Just know that that's part of our thing. We care about it. We like that word, but we also like to see in your description and your abstract how you're going to make something context applicable. Okay. Second thing is, we like to say we bring the confer back into conference. There's plenty of conferences, and we've all been to them, where people talk at you for a period of time and then say bye. And you might have an opportunity to ask a couple of quick questions, but it doesn't really turn into a collaboration. And we like to emphasize conferring. In other words, if you are going to be a speaker at CAST, you need to plan to have the attendees confer with you. And that is going to be an important part of every single presentation. We will carve out a time box for facilitated Q&A. So you don't have to do it yourself. You will be well supported by people who are very experienced in facilitation tactics and techniques. And they will manage the questions and stream them to you as a speaker. But please know this is an expectation and nobody gets out of it. So if you're not willing to do that, then maybe submit to another conference, but we'd still like to hear what you have to say. So please consider bringing the confer back into conference. So this year's team, the big reveal that we've had posted for about 10 days now, is context team. Now, what does that really mean? And sort of why? Why would the context of something be team? So here's what I'm thinking. I have met and learned from and worked with a lot of expert superstar testers in the industry. Lots. James and John Bach came to Rational when I worked there. James Whitaker. I had great opportunities to work with Elizabeth Hendrickson, co-teach with her. Robert Sabaran, Scott Barber. Some people very elemental to my current way of thinking about testing, like they change things for me. Karen Johnson is a good example. Julian Hardy is another one that comes to mind, because I've experienced these people getting into industry as or in a QA role or an individual contributor, and then being all excited to work for a company. And then in a month or 2 or 3 or 6, saying, well, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. They're not really ready to change. I can't affect anything there. This is a big bummer. And either they leave on their own, sad, mad, or they get fired. And I've heard this tale over and over and over again. So I'd like to take a little departure from, hey, let's skill build and make everyone an expert tester, because wouldn't that be cool if the world was just full of expert testers? But to say, how can an experienced tester be more valuable to their team and help them transition in a way that they can win the race they have bought into, whatever that is. So I would like to see presentations about less about the person and individual skills and more about how the person can integrate with the team and what do they need to do to work effectively on a team, and raise everybody's IQ about quality and testing and how to make that happen. Everybody participating. And one of the big reasons is you simply can't test quality in. So you could be a great tester. The project could constrain you to only really showing up at the end. And sure, you could play the role of superstar at the end. Sure, you could do that. But is that really sustainable? And is that really good for the team? Does the team own that, or do you own that? Like, what's really the cadence going on there? And is it healthy? So you can't test quality in. Can we go on a ride together? I want to see a story about how we can go on a ride together. Another challenge that I see for a lot of us is that quality has a lot of different meanings to people in teams, right? If you're talking to someone experienced in testing, their version of quality probably doesn't meet up with a developer's version of quality. And that probably doesn't meet up with a product owner or a product manager's version of quality, or a requirements engineer's version of quality. I think everybody's got a different version. And I know of at least 3 different definitions that are good for contrast. One is Phil Crosby's quality is conformance to requirements. It's a bit of a snooze. I mean, I think it's not that requirements aren't important. It's just that requirements don't talk about quality factors. Requirement says there has to be a button, but doesn't explain what a quality button is. So this is part of our problem. Joe Duran talks about quality is fitness for use. Me likey, fitness for use. And in theory, That's really, really important to users, but how much does a product owner, someone who writes requirements, a product manager, a software engineer, a designer, an architect really understand about quality from a user's perspective? I see that link broken very frequently. And my last one that I like to share is from Jerry Weinberg: quality is value to some person. Great. So everybody on a team has a different version of quality. Well, can you imagine if you were all in a race car trying to win the race, and the race is about quality, and you're all believing that the finish line is in a different place? That's not going to work very well. And working against people is not very efficient. It's not very effective. And I see a lot of amazing testers do it. Fight the good fight and not get far. So if we can remember one thing, that especially in Agile, DevOps gives us another look at this. Quality isn't really about a tester showing up and making everything great. It's everyone's job, and everyone needs to take some responsibility there. And the tester can be a coach, can be a guide, can be a facilitator, can be a teacher, an educator, can do so much for the team. That's the kind of stuff we want to hear about this year at CAST. And the last one is quality takes time, effort, budget. It's got to fit. So any commitment to quality should be understood the same way by the team, and therefore invested in by the larger team. And we're talking not just product owners, product slash project managers, but we're talking sponsors, project sponsors, the people who pay for a project to actually happen. They need to buy into it too, because if they don't, we won't have the time we need. We won't have the tools we need. We won't have the people we need. And that will compromise our collective success. So that's why context team. So a couple ways to think about how this might play out in a conference talk you might submit. So I'd like to see stories about testers working together, not necessarily with other testers, but with other team members. So collaborating with developers, maybe on unit tests, maybe during backlog grooming to create acceptance criteria or requirements reviews or something like that. Basically working in tandem. Why? Because in the real world of how software gets built, engineer does something and then it's available to test. It really doesn't matter who tests it, but these things come in tandem. And if we can't figure out how to align not just our goals, but our work, then there's a lot of things that can't happen. There's a lot of, I'd say, efficiencies we can't take advantage of if we're not understanding this collaboration. And I'll give you just one example of how it shows up in kind of a broken way in Agile. If you're familiar with Agile, you might know about a Scrum board where you have these swim lanes. And just think of it this way: you got a work in progress pile. You have a dev and test swim lane, and then maybe a done. Well, here's the deal: if somebody says it's dev done, I would just put a question mark there. It's really not dev done until some testing has been done to know that dev is done. so nothing can really move too far without the other thing. So I want you to be like visualizing this tandem bicycle and opportunities for that to happen, or experiences that you've had where you've enabled that to happen. And I think when there's this collaborative work happening within a team, it builds trust. And when you have trust, there's a lot less finger pointing and playing the blame game and trying to shelve responsibility to quality to someone who has the QA or QE or a tester logo on their forehead as if they're the only people that could ever run a test. Stop. It can be more than that. And if we were mutually responsible, wow, we could share work. We could throw work back and forth. We could keep the flow of work going and not be stalled because it's waiting for somebody. Those are some of the big tenets in Agile and DevOps. And sometimes we can't take advantage of them because we don't have these concepts supporting us. And lastly, can we tie the work that we're doing to real outcomes? Sometimes we test things and people aren't interested. Why wouldn't they be interested? Well, maybe they didn't have that buy-in in the first place. So let's make sure everybody on the team understands the outcomes and what it means to arrive. In other words, to win the race. So that's the T. With that, with this notion that we're working in tandem and that we are responsible for outcomes together. When we build on that trust and we're going in the same direction, we're not working against each other, you get people really energized and engaged in the work. And that's huge. I've been there. And I can't say I've always been there. I've seen situations where it really, really works and it's amazing. It's like you go to work and you're on this high. You're like, wow, I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to work with these people. I'm really making a difference. This encourages me to show up every day and do more. And we know there's always more to do. We always know there's too much to do. But when we share it, it feels less burdensome. And when it's less burdensome, we have effortlessness, right? And a better flow of work. And that's a lot of what we're trying to achieve in the real world. I don't know how many times we hit it. But when we do, there is sheer elegance to the work. And that is an attainable goal. It is something I've seen. It is something other people have told me about. And I want to share more of that because I don't think we're in the sweet spot of, 80% of the industry is living in this happy, happy, joy, joy place. I think we have some work to do. So I'd like to share some of those things. The A makes me think of acceptance, not just acceptance criteria, but acceptance of quality goals and figuring out how to transition them into actionable, achievable acceptance criteria for a team. Not, here's all these things you need to do. Here's this much time. It's not going to fit. Sorry. That's the story of too many projects. But when there's commitments to goals, I think the team is more inspired. And when they are, I think they accelerate their work and their progress towards their end goal because they understand it, because they understand what it takes to get there. Those are some of the things I'd like to see shared at CAS this year. And the last thing, M makes me think of, I mentioned pivot in the call for papers. How can people take their great testers and their great testing process and make a shift that applies to a new context, maybe even on a project midstream, because sometimes things change. And when they do, we need to be able to maneuver. Otherwise, we are out of the race. So I'd like to see stories about that. I think a team that works better together and has shared goals can measure success as a team. One of the things that kind of flips my bozo bit a little bit is when people talk about testing metrics. I'm like, testing metrics. Okay, so is that like how many defect reports we wrote? Or is it how many defect reports got fixed? I don't know. Is that how many tester hours were consumed? Because I don't know that relates to much. Or my favorite, let's count test cases. How many test cases did we plan? How many did we execute? How many passed? How many failed? Stop. That's not useful for the larger team. You might be able to tune some things from that. That's fine. But I'd rather see measurable things related to goals and outcomes. And when we, the royal we as a team, don't make it, I'd like to see the royal we adjust. Not just somebody finger pointing at testing and saying, you need to do that better. Because I think there's more to it than that. So I want to see stories about that. And when we've got a well-oiled team, things are maintainable and sustainable. and we avoid things like burnout. So I'd like to see stories about avoiding burnout and capitalizing on shared work and having a teammate that's not a tester per se, but somebody else that can have your back so you don't feel like you're doing it all alone. That's context team. So for keynotes, here's what we're looking for. I'd like to see a big message or a story tied to the theme of team. Maybe a tale of a journey that someone has been through. Maybe they arrived on scene as a very experienced tester, really had an opportunity to infuse the team, the project, the company with some QA, QE, Kool-Aid, and could affect change. Did they? Didn't they? And why and how? Tell that story. I think that would be pretty powerful. Of course, I'd like to see a success story, but that doesn't mean, even if it's a success story, that every single thing that was tried or attempted over the journey was successful. I'm sure there were many things that weren't. We'd like to hear about those too. But ultimately, we'd like to see how it all can come together. Maybe some tips and hacks for growing effective teams. I know I've worked at companies that did all kinds of things, from Myers-Briggs to having, group training together, all sorts of things. Some things worked, some things didn't at all, but they tried. And those experiences are valuable to share. Essential collaboration tactics and techniques. Two extreme ones, things that sound really kooky, that you couldn't imagine doing, but here's somebody telling you, hey, we tried this and it really, really worked. These are some of the things that you see in some group agile training and Scrum Master training classes. They're amazing things, but it focuses on how the team can work better together. So I'd be interested in that. And ultimately, for career testers that have so much to share, if there's a story out there about not how you saved a team from itself, but how did you transition a team to own quality, knowing that you could walk away and they would still win. That's huge. I don't know how many stories out there look like that, but I'd like to see that. Not because I think it happens every day, but I think that's kind of a place we want to get to, not talk ourselves out of a job, but make the job less burdensome, more fun, more connected to the vital work that we're doing for our organizations. So that's what I'd like to see, big, powerful messages for keynotes. Now for workshops, tutorials, shorter in duration, absolutely want and need a hands-on component to it, but not just individual hands-on. I want to see group work. I want to see group work, teamwork, something like that, where everybody succeeds together or everybody goes down together. That's the kind of thing that I would like people to experience. The goal of any workshop or tutorial should be skill building in some way, but at least through some combination of a practical hands-on experience the attendees can have, along with knowledge transfer that you can share, right? Tell the story, but don't just tell the story. It's gotta have some working component to it. We'd also like to see the attendees have the ability to use their new skill, whatever it is you're trying to share with them, during the session, and apply it to their context, their scenario, their project, their team, their product. I don't care what it is. It would just be nice to see them do the near, maybe far transfer of your mission in the session, and actually make that tangible for them, make it relatable for them. So I'd like to see that. And as a side effect, it would be nice if people could have some sort of take-home component, whether that's a job aid that you hand out to them, or something that they build during the session, like a list or a mind map or something like that. That would be fantastic. That is the iconic thing we're looking for there. Now, ultimately, because of theme, we want things that will focus on team and teamwork and team success over individual testing skills. Why? Because we've been delivering individual testing skills to testers for decades. We've done that. There's a lot of people in the industry that have great knowledge, great experience, and they can share that at conference, tutorials, workshops, track sessions. That's all fine. But we would like to differentiate this year and save space for teams. So if it's not focused on team, and if it doesn't have a team building group exercise component, it's probably not going to be considered. Now, for a track session, we have more flexibility. If you're familiar with CAST and our format, you know that experience reports, so firsthand experience, is more valued than other things. Please don't give me a synopsis of a book that you read. You could give me a synopsis of a book that you read with things that you tried to implement with your team and the results. That'd be great. That's more like a case study. But I'd only be interested in case studies if you were involved. Please don't deliver somebody else's because of our confer part of our conference and our commitment to that. We expect facilitated Q&A to take a third of the presentation time. If you can't answer direct questions that attendees have about your content, it's not going to be a very valuable experience for them. So please keep that in mind. I'd also like to see some experiences and maybe tactics, techniques, or examples of things that people have used to teach testing concepts to non-testers. So to product owners, product/project managers, requirements people, developers, engineers, architects, maybe even to executives. I've had to do this. To teach testing to executives. It's not easy, but there's some powerful messages in there if we can be successful meeting people where they are. So if an executive has very little understanding of technical details, don't go into technical babble. If someone really wants to know how is this going to save me time and money, like they're a project manager using Gantt charts and moving little triangles around, okay, we'll talk to the triangle, like talk to their concerns. Helping people understand how to bridge those gaps is huge, and I don't think we do it enough. And I do think it will increase our chances for success. So a real opportunity there. I'd like to see some of that. Guides, tools, techniques, examples for shared work, like how could we share responsibilities for unit testing? How could we share responsibilities for tests that would get into a continuous integration pipeline? I don't expect to use all the same tools. I don't expect to have all the same levels of tests, but I think we could share some things. And also for paired work of all kinds. So in theory, we've learned how to do shared or paired testing with other testers, but I'd like to see examples of, yeah, let's do that with a developer. Let's do that with an architect. Let's do it with a product manager, project manager. I'd like to see that. So what have you done? What have you tried? What worked? What didn't? Maybe a little show and tell and a little mental exercises for the attendees would be good there. So think about, could this work in your scenario? Maybe set up a debate. So if you thought there were things about testers that made it challenging for them to work in teams and people kind of, I'd say, self-select into a particular group. I believe this. I believe this. Great. Those things are not the same. Let's break off into groups and debate the value of each of those things and use experiences to talk, not just I think, but I've seen, and this has happened, and this was the response. I'd like to see some of that stuff because there's not just one way and one answer. We know that. We're a fan, and we live in the context-driven space. So why not let people debate it with their experience? Or maybe throw out a topic for a panel discussion. I don't know if it really fits into the program, but if there was something compelling enough, we'd certainly consider it and find a place for it. So all of those things could be considered, in the session track talk box. So a couple notes about what we're not looking for. We've got about 22, 23 submissions so far. And there's a handful of them that don't fit. So here's one that's going to get dismissed out of turn. Sessions that are exclusively about tools. Let me show you a tool. Let me show you how to use this tool. Let's do this with this tool. I'm sorry. The theme of this conference is about team. Team is not tool. They're two different words. So after working for a tools company for 10 years, I've seen how people try to push tools on teams to say, everything will be better when you have this tool. No, if you have an inspiring story about a tool that enabled your team's success, please tell us not about the tool. Don't show us all these things about the tool. Tell us what in the tool enabled your success. Because who knows, maybe some team could build that tool on their own. They don't have to buy it from a vendor or whatever. I would just like to understand the essential elements that enabled your team to work better together of those tools. And if there was any way to replicate that, instead of using a tool in the session, I don't know, use Post-it notes and Legos or something, and say, if we had this, it would work like a tool. Some tools that do these things could help you instead of focus on one tool. So that's my spiel about tools. Anything that's not on theme, we got a couple of really good submissions so far, and things that were really inspiring me, like I'd like to go see that thing, but not really on theme. So those are going to get shelved, and if there's space in the program, we might consider them, but they will not be our first picks. I don't want to see a talk that anyone could deliver. I want to see a talk that only you can deliver from your experience, your knowledge, your ideas, your sass, your style, like all that set of things that's iconically you. I want that to shine through in your abstract and your description and your actual live session. If it's as boring as it could be written down and read by anyone, no, thank you. There's other conferences where you could deliver talks like that. This won't be the one. I saw a great submission around building a QA team and transitioning it into a QE team. That specifically is not the team we're talking about in our theme. Context team is about testers working with other team members to get out of the project alive, maybe get out of the project good, like on time, on budget, happy customers, made money, shipped early, I don't know, all those things. But it's that team. So think developers, people who focus on requirements, users, all the way up to executives. It's that larger team that we're talking about. And sessions that don't have any attendee involvement or activities are going to be put on the wait list as a thing to consider after we've exhausted all the good candidates that do have some kind of interactive component. In other words, I want to see people take your idea and be able to apply it in their context before they leave. Because if they don't, then they're not going to be able to ask you questions in the session. They have to be taxed with that challenge in the session. So that's what we'd like to see. I just want to, take a moment, see if there's any questions, comments, suggestions. Dwayne, do you have anything to add?
I don't think I have anything to add. I think that was really great at kind of highlighting everything that we're looking for from this cast, especially around the kind of team discussions that we're really looking for.
Yeah. Any questions?
Should I just ask a bunch of
Yeah,
questions since I'm
yeah.
Whatever.
Ask a bunch of questions.
Okay. First one, the times that you put in the in your presentation and the paper call,
Little
are
different.
do those include the open season, or?
When
Okay.
it comes to like the track sessions, like that's 40 to 45 minutes is presentation time with the 15 to 20 minute open season. So the CFP paper call timings, like those should be fairly accurate, but the workshops could actually be 1 hour to 2 hours, depending on what we get in terms of submissions.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if I submit a track talk, I should expect to talk for 30 minutes and then answer questions for 15.
Talk for 40 to 45. Talk
Yep.
for
Okay.
40 to 45, and we will add. We're trying to box things into basically an hour-ish for our schedule.
Gotcha.
So good clarification. Thank you.
Okay. The other thing, and I think this is a bit more clear after your presentation, but just so it's crystal clear, when you say, when I hear team building, there's two kinds of things that I think of when I hear team building. One is like, trying to get members of an existing team to work better together. It's often
Yep.
like a ropes course or escape room or something like that.
And we did some of those things.
Yeah.
It didn't always work out too
well.
But it's good.
The other kind of team building is taking and either hiring new team members or
Yeah.
upskilling existing team members so that they can test better, develop better, whatever. Is there one of those that you're looking for more than the other? Are you looking for a mix, or?
I think there's a little bit of a mix, because while I mentioned the submission that was about building a QA team, that wasn't quite where we wanted to go. I would say building testing and quality skills within a larger team, but for people who don't have the role of testing necessarily, or the role of QA. But it's not, how do you build a QA team from scratch? Or, not that. I think that's been done. I think a lot of that stuff is out there. I think it's very valuable. I don't want to redo that. So I'm trying to find, like I said, a space that's kind of been in the shadows a little bit, where we haven't really emphasized this too much. I mean, Scrum Agile certainly does, right? Scrum Master training all focuses on team, but doesn't necessarily focus on quality. Doesn't necessarily focus on testing, right? So I'm trying to get into the space where we really haven't banged the drum quite enough yet. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let's
Cool.
see. If I had ideas for particularly one of the longer, tutorials or workshops or something, but it included stuff that I've already presented at previous casts, would that be acceptable too? Or
I think so. I don't think there's any problem. I know sometimes conference organizers put a moratorium on, we only want fresh talks. We only want, fresh content. I'm sorry. Like I said, been in the biz like 40 years now. There ain't too much that's fresh. You could put a new spin on it, or you could tie it to some exercises, or tie it to theme, or draw some different conclusions or lessons from the same content. So I think as long as you freshen it up, I don't have any problem with that at all. And if people who have attended CAST before get enough out of your description, like if you're clear about the content of your session, then if people didn't want to redo that, they could self-select out, right? Because they'll be on the second day, we'll have 2 tracks. So people would have an option if they didn't want to repeat something.
And what could also be interesting is someone that came in and presented 5 to 10 years ago and said, hey, this is how teams were back in 2010, 2015. And now teams are doing it this way, and showing that kind of comparison and growth that's happened and
Right.
changes could be really awesome.
So a reflection on that, kind of like, was it Fred Brooks' book? Why am I blanking out on the name? It's a software engineering kind of almost manifesto. He believes this, he believes that. He wrote a silver.
Oh, was it the Mythical Man Month?
Mythical Man Month. So it doesn't sound like that's related to testing, but there's some really good stuff in there that everybody on the team needs to know about the dynamics of software engineering. And he talks about why software engineering doesn't work from a project management perspective. Sorry, it's like mostly R&D. And then you really can't predict 100% of R&D stuff and make that a predictable model for developing and delivering software. It's like square peg round hole, just doesn't work. And there's so many other gems in that book. But his silver anniversary edition, what he did is he wrote an essay about his previously published chapter and said, here's what I think about this now. And some of them he was like, yeah, I was smoking crack. I don't know what I was thinking while I was doing that. That's just not right at all. Or that doesn't apply anymore today. Or. But I thought that was a really nice way to refresh and update something that he put out before. He didn't rewrite the whole book. He didn't write a second book. He just wrote essays about what he wrote before. And I really liked it. Thought it was cool. So does that work, Curtis?
Yeah. So I know you're working with a very limited ticket or attendee size this year. How do you feel about co-presenting?
I don't think there's any issue with co-presenting. As a matter of fact, I was going to put this in here, but I'm so glad you're here because you ask all the best questions. You got to know that, dude. You really do. I was thinking about, could somebody co-present and show that teamwork, shared work sort of thing, right? Being able to hand the baton back and forth and continue on theme. And, as opposed to, I deliver this part that's mine and you deliver this part that's yours. So if there's any element where a co-presenting scenario could illustrate the concepts that you're trying to get across, I think that would be a really powerful message. So I would absolutely entertain co-presenters. Now, as far as compensation and the board goes, I don't know how much flexibility we have on that, but if somebody submits it, we'll respond. And
yeah, and we generally split the if there's an honorarium for a particular talk, then we will split that. I'm not sure what those look like currently.
Okay. What if I were to submit a talk or tutorial, whatever, say I got accepted and I want to add a co-presenter after the fact? Is that acceptable? Like if I find somebody else with a different perspective or just a lot of energy around the same thing that I want it to, the thing that I described in the abstract, would I be able to add a co-presenter after the fact? Because
I think we'd
finding
allow
somebody by the end of the month might be
I think we'd allow it. We would just like to see that as fast as possible so that we can get all the program updates so that it is reflective of what the attendees are going to see at the conference.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point there, Curtis, and I will consider this. I've already reviewed the submissions that are there, but I'm going to take another look at a couple to see if there's maybe a submission that could be made stronger by having two people present together and say, y'all are talking about similar things and you got a slightly different take on it. Could you consider, splitting your time and co-presenting? So So I'll look at that too. Now, right now, the submissions are anonymous. Um, a lot of people do have a particular flair and set of style points that I can identify, but for the most part, I'm trying not to know
Yeah, I'm
who's
trying to
used.
phrase my questions in a way that won't necessarily reveal what
Yeah,
I mean, some of
If
them might be obvious, but I don't
if
know.
I see a Dune reference, I know it's Curtis.
it's totally okay. But at some point, if I decide to do that because I think there are two really strong things and we only really have one slot, I will reveal the speaker names to myself. And I might tap some people and suggest that. Not because I want to take away from anybody's single contribution, but there might be more power in a shared contribution. So thank you for that. That's good. What else you got?
Why NASCAR?
Oh, because
Doesn't sound like fun.
I'm not really a car guy. I've kind of been assuming that it's cheap conference space, with enough room for the size of conference that we think we're gonna get.
It's definitely not the cheapest. Like we could have tried to
Okay.
find like a workspace that was way cheaper, but like we wanted to kind of bring something back from like what we got from Atlanta. Atlanta was a really awesome stadium. We got some really cool benefits of being at that location and presenting in that way. And we wanted to make CAS kind of stand out from different conferences and be a place that it's not really at like a hotel, or it's not just at a regular venue. We want to make it exciting.
unique.
Okay.
We were
Yeah.
going for unique. We also were going for something that not necessarily would limit our size, but be really interactive and experiential for people. And we are actually putting on the program, in place of a tutorial, a team building exercise that is run by the venue.
And it
So,
works really well with the theme as like
yeah.
team. Like NASCAR is
Yeah.
very team oriented. You might not think about it at first, but it
Sure.
really does get highlighted once you learn more about how NASCAR works.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not just a good car, not just a good driver. There's way more to it than that, all the way, out to sponsorship. So there's going to be physical challenges. There's going to be a competitive aspect in scoring. That's part of it. They'll be presenting. There's like a trivia component that's not all focused on NASCAR because they know not everybody is into NASCAR. There'll be a creative component to it. So I think with all of the activities that are stacked into that half day total group, everyone will be doing this thing together, everyone. And we'll break off into smaller groups, and the groups will go through all the activities and compete and present at the end of it. So that is our second tutorial of the day on our first day. And it's pretty cool that it fits into team. But in general, not necessarily driving, but I think there's a lot of analogies that fit with software testing. Like a sprint could feel like a race. A project could feel like a race. There's different people observing it. There's different people sponsoring it. Different people are interested in different things about it. And everybody's got a different way to contribute. And what can we share that we're not sharing now? I see so many testers are individual contributors and everything is sitting on them. And even when everything isn't sitting on them, they still feel like the entire world is on their shoulders. And bless their hearts, I think that's why a lot of people get into testing, because they want to help. And then they end up with this incredible burden that they can't seem to share or get out from under, and that crushes some people. I mean, I've seen it crush their career, their soul, their energy. This is not what these kind of people deserve. These people deserve to shine, but you can't do it trying to drag along a project that don't want to go. So in something like NASCAR, everybody want to go. Everybody, and everybody knows where we're going, and everybody's focused on right, outcomes, and everybody has a
Yeah.
different way to contribute. So I think that's very nicely tied into our space right now, and kind of the, I don't know, it's not really a wall, but I'd say some of the challenges that I hear people talk about with their teams moving to agile and DevOps, and it's kind of agile-ish and it's kind of not working, and they do this and we do that, and it's just like those things don't sound any different to the stuff we whine about in waterfall. So what happened there?
Yeah.
So
We're
that's
a
what
little
I'd
over
like to see.
time here, but I think that that's been a great review of the CFP and the theme. So I'm going to stop the recording, but if you
Oh,
want to continue
wait,
talking, more than free to. So
wait,
I'm going to,
one sec, one
oh,
sec. Last thing after the questions. So get your mental engines running, see what you got in the hopper. Please submit something. If you're not sure and you have lots of questions about it, just put questions in the submission and we'll respond to you. We'll let you know how to make that thing fit if you're really passionate about delivering. So
or
work
on the
with us.
Slack channel too.
Yeah, work with us. We'll work with you, and sooner than later is better.